All right, hello everyone. Good morning. Happy waning days of summer. My name is Jill Escher. I am the president of Autism Society San Francisco Bay Area, and I am your moderator today for this webinar, Autism and Developmental Disability Housing in California, an overview, featuring Ashley Kim of Elevare Community. In case you are a webinaraholic, and you want to see our past webinars from the spring, just go to sfautismsociety.org/webinars and you will see the archives of all of these online. In addition, this fall, starting in September through at least November, we are going to present with some partners an online symposium devoted to the topic of severe behaviors. So stay tuned for news about that. Please note, we will take questions during her presentation and also following her presentation. You are all on mute, so you can't voice them, but you can type them into the question bar, which is in the control panel. That should be at the right of your screen. If you're calling in and not on the computer, you can email any questions to me directly at jill.escher, that's E-S-C-H-E-R, @gmail.com. If for some reason you can hear me, but you can't see the presentation screen, sometimes it's kind of hovering under your browser, so kind of move some windows around, it might be under there. All of the attendees are on mute, so you can have a party and we will not be able to hear you. And the webinar, as I said, is being recorded. It will run for about an hour, and then we will allow up to 30 minutes, maybe a little less, for questions. All right, so now I'm happy to introduce our speaker today. Ashley Kim is the president and CEO of Elevare Community, a nonprofit organization committed to building supportive residential communities for adults with developmental disabilities. She also advocates for disability rights pertaining to housing and services at both the state and federal level. Prior to Elevare, Ashley was the co-founder and executive director of Vida, a nonprofit housing organization that's building affordable housing for adults with developmental disabilities in San Diego. Welcome, Ashley.
Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Autism Society of San Francisco Bay Area. I'm very excited to be here to talk about autism and disability housing in California.
All right.
Okay, so can you see my...
I can't see it yet. Can you, did you click on
screen.
show my screen? Yeah.
All right. So, can you see it now?
No. Oh, wait, yes, I can. See, it was under my browser.
Okay.
Yep, you're good.
All right.
You can put it on full screen if you'd like.
Okay. So, why do we need more supportive housing? For the first time in history, this generation of adult children with developmental disabilities are outliving their parents. California's DD population grew by almost 40% between 2006 and 2016. Meanwhile, the general population grew by 9.5% around the same time period. Many quality residential communities are now at full capacity as more people are living longer. And needless to say, the demand for DD housing is outpacing supplies. So when I talk to families, I hear these questions the most. First, why aren't regional centers doing enough for housing? Well, technically, they're supposed to fund services, not housing. There are exceptions, but mainly regional centers are in charge of services. Now, they do pay for community care facilities and intermediate care facilities, but these are licensed care facilities, but not independent housing.
Yeah. Hey, Ashley, I'm going to butt in for a second, as I probably will a couple times during the webinar. I just want to note that the Lanterman Act does have a provision that DDS, Department of Developmental Services, does have the responsibility to ensure that California has a plan to provide for housing for adults with developmental disabilities. So there's a sort of circuitous mandate that's not really a mandate, and no one's ever really enforced that.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was actually a bill that was passed about 9 years ago that to authorize regional centers to pay for rent payments for housing, but that has not been implemented. And I've asked the DDS many times about what the status of that bill or the implementation of it, but I believe that due to funding issues, I'm not really sure when they will be able to implement housing. But technically, the money, the funding that's set aside for DD services, at least at the federal level, that's not supposed to go towards housing. So I just wanted to, emphasize the reason why I'm saying this is because you can't just rely on regional center to take care of housing for your child's needs, because technically their priority is really to provide services. So it's definitely more complicated than what it.
Yeah, anyway, that's fine. Go ahead.
Okay, so the second question is, why can't successful communities like Casa de Amma or Sweetwater Spectrum and others expand and build more units? Well, it takes a whole new set of budget and resources and staff to build and expand, and many of these organizations just do not have extra cash flows to fund expansion so easily. So many of them need to fundraise just to cover their operation gap every year, because the state's reimbursement rate does not cover everything. So we're just going to have to be mindful of the fact that, yes, these communities are out there, but they are full, and we have to think about other options. So let's look at the critical need we have in California. There are about 320,000 individuals receiving services from developmental disability services, and almost half of them are 18 and older, and about 95,000 of them have autism. I'm pretty sure that there are thousands of people that are not in the system that would need this housing placement as well, but eventually most of these individuals will need some type of housing placement, especially once their parents are gone. So where do they live now? Most of them are still living with their parents and family guardians, about 80% of them. Only 8% are living independently, and 9% in community care facilities known as group homes, and 2% in intermediate care facilities. So let's look at these categories more closely. Intermediate care facilities are long-term care facilities that provide 24-hour care. Medi-Cal is the primary payer of this type of services. There are various types of ICFs depending on individuals' need for care. While we would prefer to have as many individuals in community settings as possible, we have to recognize that there will be individuals who have complex medical needs that would require ICF settings, and that they would suffer harm if they were removed from these settings. I mean, I speak with many families across the country that have children with severe challenges, and they're grateful for the wonderful care their children have received in ICFs. And at the end of the day, it's about choice. There are community care facilities that are more known as licensed group homes, and they provide 24-hour non-medical care. They are designated according to their service levels 1 through 4, again, depending on the individual's need. Level 4 facilities are again subdivided into levels 4A through I, and as the level of care goes up, staffing level goes up. And you can actually look at the reimbursement rates on the link that it's provided. It's really based on the care that's required for each individual in these facilities. And you can look up these facilities online, but your regional center coordinator should be able to provide information on what's available in your area that fits your child's need. So let's move on to independent housing. When we think about independent housing, we think of private residences. They are rental apartment units, condominium units, single-family homes, but no licensed care facilities. When it comes to rental or sale of a home, you have to understand the Fair Housing Act. This law prohibits discrimination based on race, color, disability, or even family status, and more. For example, you cannot deny a family with a baby a rental unit because you think the baby is going to cry and keep all the neighbors up at night, because that's actually considered discrimination. So in case of a rental application from someone with a disability, it's actually illegal to ask what the disability is. Another example is if your tenant wants to get a service dog and the doctor prescribed a service dog for her, you have to make a reasonable accommodation to her disability. You cannot ask like what her disability is, but you can ask to see the doctor's note. When it comes to paying rent, residents typically rely on their SSI check, housing vouchers, or family assistance to cover rent payments. One thing to note is that if your child is over 18 years old and if it's possible to get on a wait list for Section 8 vouchers, housing vouchers, also known as choice vouchers, please get them on the list. Contact your city or housing authority in your local area. It will take years, probably at least 10, but it's so worth it. And if you're not sure where to sign up for vouchers, you can either contact me or go to affordablehousing.online.com.
Actually, I'm going to butt in here for a second just because this is the business that I'm in. I'm a private landlord providing ultra-low-income housing for adults with autism and other developmental disabilities. I have about 9 DD tenants right now. I've had 11 or 12 total over the years. Mm-hmm. I also have, your regular old non-disabled tenants as well. It's a mix. And I really want to emphasize that the reason that my disabled tenants can rent from me, except I think in one case, is because they have these Section 8 vouchers. And just so people understand how powerful these vouchers are, if you have a voucher, you pay the landlord 1/3 of your income. And your income is usually Social Security, which is about $900 a month. So my tenants pay me about $300 a month for units that are market rate, let's just say around $2,000 a month. So the difference, I don't get market rate, by the way, the difference is made up for by the federal government through the housing authorities. It's HUD money. So just do the math, and you can see how incredibly powerful it is to have a Section 8 voucher. It is an entree to community-based housing like that I provide. I do want to say quickly that it's almost impossible to get these vouchers because sometimes the wait lists, especially in our area, are not even open. You can't even get on the wait list. They're closed. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a tragedy and a travesty, but that's another political rant for another time. I also want to say that a lot of landlords will not take Section 8 vouchers and will not rent to you. I would say now in the boom of the Silicon Valley area, you see fewer and fewer availability of these units. When I get a tenant, the tenants are incredibly grateful to have a landlord willing to, number one, charge under market rate, which is what you need, and then deal with the bureaucracy of the housing authority. So very, very powerful model and extremely difficult to access right now.
Yes, absolutely. But I do see that some of the parents that end up buying homes for their child become their landlord and do accept the voucher. So it's
if they can get the voucher.
If they can get the vouchers,
yeah. And then you need an exception. I don't want to get into the weeds, but you need an exception from the housing authority to do that too. But anyway, go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. No, this is great. No, this is very helpful. Thank you. And we'll go more into that later in the presentation. So when you live in a private home, you can receive supported living services, independent living services. Those are through your regional center coordinator. And then you can also receive in-home support services, which I will cover in the next slide. So these are the examples of supported living services. And it's pretty self-explanatory. And while this list of service examples may look very promising and they could greatly help the individual to be able to live independently, I do have to say that there are challenges that come with off-site supported living services or independent living services providers. I've seen great service providers and doing a superb job with residents, but there's also usually a high employee turnover rate, and the quality of workers may not be so consistent. And this is the reality that we have to face due to funding issues. And this is why some of the residential communities provide their own on-site services. So there are some restrictions when it comes to owning the property and providing services on-site. So you're going to have to do some research before you decide to go that route. One thing to note is that if your child lives at home with you or a guest house unit in your home backyard where you physically live, he or she cannot receive support living services. That's because supported living services are for those that are living independently from their caregivers or family members.
Yeah. Editorial note, I want to say that's a terrible rule.
Yeah.
It really discriminates families that don't have the ability to access housing outside of their home.
I agree.
Very discriminatory, and I hate that rule. So, editorial comment.
Yeah, so I agree. It's only families that can afford to buy a house next door and have a separate address can make this happen. But it's unfortunately, I mean that's the reality that we have to face. But I'll definitely get into in-home support services, which is available for those that are still living at home. So when we talk about services, we have to talk about the federal Medicaid funding regulation called the Home and Community-Based Settings Rule. About 1/3 of California's DDS funding comes from the federal government's Medicaid funding, so this rule definitely applies to us. At a very high level, this rule requires that the setting, either residential or day program, is integrated and supports individuals to have full access to the greater community. It ensures facilitates individuals' choice regarding residential and service options, and it protects individuals' privacy, dignity, and respect. But this rule does not allow settings identified as an institution, such as nursing facilities, ICFs, or others that have qualities of an institutional setting. Now, this does not mean that there is no funding for institutions. There is. It's just not going to be coming out of the home and community-based settings funding. Now, the rule states that the settings have qualities of an institutional settings are any settings that is located in a building that is an institution, that any setting that is located in a building on the grounds of or immediately adjacent to or public institution, or any other setting that has the effect of isolating individuals with disabilities from the broader community. I have mixed feelings about even this guidance because there are plenty of great residential communities that are adjacent to or on the same campus as public institutions, or actually not public institution, but as institution, because I do believe in the importance of continuum of care. Because many individuals with developmental disabilities, their needs, they may not be permanent, and their needs might evolve in the future based on, how they age and how their condition evolve. So I do not believe that settings that's located on the same ground or adjacent to a public institution is necessarily bad. But this is the current guidance that's coming from the federal government. I mean, we could spend a whole day dissecting this HCBS rule, but I'll probably lose everyone, so I won't do that. Jill has written some great articles on HCBS, including myths versus facts. So please visit Autism Society of San Francisco Bay Area's website to retrieve those articles. And I can even email you, so if you contact me, I can send you the links. Some might argue that any disability-specific settings, such as congregant or intentional communities, might have the effect of isolating individuals with disabilities from the greater community. Others might argue exactly the opposite, that because of these intentional communities, individuals with developmental disabilities are more integrated into the greater community. My opinion is that every individual is different, and he or she should have a freedom to choose based on what works for him or her. We need to expand and maximize options and not restrict them. Now, every state has to submit a plan to the Center for Medicaid and Medicare Services, which is a federal agency that administers Medicaid. We'll call them CMS. Each state has to show how it's going to implement the new rule by 2022. Only a handful of small states have had their plans approved by the CMS. So California is still awaiting its approval. Currently, our plan states that private residences are presumed to be in compliance. There's no density limit, which means that there are people that say you can't set aside more than 25% of units for people with disabilities. That's not the case for California's transition plan, and that's not a state or federal mandate. It does not prohibit disability-specific settings, such as intentional communities. So, when you hear, oh, they don't want congregant settings, that's not true. It does, however, focus on choice and person-centered plan. If you have any more questions about home and community-based settings, you can submit your questions, and I'll be happy to answer them during Q&A or after this webinar. Now let's turn to in-home supportive services. These services are administered by each county with oversight by the California Department of Social Services. Even if your child lives at home with parents, he or she can still receive IHSS. And Medi-Cal pays for this, so your child must be eligible for Medi-Cal. But if your child is eligible for SSI, he should be eligible for Medi-Cal. So once your child is eligible, a social worker will do an assessment and can determine the number of support hours your child needs. A parent or guardian can become a care provider through IHSS, which is pretty common actually. Now that we have covered various residential types and services, you may be interested in how residential communities can be developed. So I'm going to focus on that from now on. So let's look at the housing need in San Mateo County. According to California Housing Partnership Corporation, the average asking rent in San Mateo County is $3,500 a month, which means you'll need to earn over $11,000 to afford this rent. So I'm not going to be able to live in San Mateo County anytime soon. And this is exactly why more families need to advocate for affordable housing for people with developmental disabilities in California. I mean, you have to go to your local city, county, housing authorities, ask for vouchers, ask for grants, just keep asking because you're going to have to speak up for them to listen. So let's compare housing models that could be built with public sources of funding versus private sources of funding. There are some great examples of publicly funded housing models. As they say, there's nothing new under the sun. These are just some great organizations that have built affordable housing for people with developmental disabilities in the state of California and also Florida. United Cerebral Palsy really pioneered this, but they actually focus now more on services. They don't really focus on housing anymore. Jack Capon Villa, which is in Northern California, another great affordable housing model. Arc of San Francisco, Arc of Jacksonville, Florida are some great examples. They've used low-income housing tax credits, state bond financing, HUD funds, such as home funds, Section 811, project-based vouchers, which is pretty much similar as Section 8 vouchers, just that the voucher stays with the development project, not the person. City or county funding, state grants, community foundations. Unfortunately, these funding programs are becoming more competitive than ever. Rents are usually restricted to affordable levels, typically for about 55 years or so. The advantages that you have with public finance model is that you can leverage various public sources of funding. So it requires very little capital on your end. The long-term affordability offers protection for its residents. And for those who are looking for land donations from cities, most likely these parcels are set aside for affordable housing development, so you can access these opportunities. Disadvantages are that funding programs are just very, very competitive now, especially now these days in California with homeless and veteran housing projects. Cities are just funding them so much that sometimes the DD housing is just kind of pushed to the side. It takes a very long time to build, and compliance can be very challenging, and you have less control over the development and tenant selection process, as some cities might require pure lottery selection. So basically, if you're involved in this type of project and if you would like for your child to get selected, you know, he or she will have to get selected by pure luck, not because of your participation or your contribution. So most importantly, there are not that many affordable housing developers that understand this population's unique housing needs. For example, it's very common to run into developers who think people with developmental disabilities are compatible with people who are chronically homeless or mentally ill. We can designate all units for people with disabilities depending on the funding sources. Some require 100% to be designated, which was the case for Villa de Vida. Some require a mix, which is the case with Arc of Jacksonville in Florida, which was an 80-20% mix. There are some questions of whether we can choose our own residence, if there's a buy-in, or whether we can offer guarantees. Depending on the funding sources, you can come up with your own tenant selection criteria and process, but we cannot give preferences when you're using public funding. That said, some cities or counties may not give preferences to their local residents, depending on the mix of the residents and just the fair housing issues. But there's definitely no buying option for rental units. And I know of some organizations that have been able to give some type of preferences, not using the word preference, but I believe that, you know, it's pretty black and white, and certain organizations are willing to take more risk and some are not. So it's really up to you, your organization, of how you want to go about doing this. Our support services and case management.
I'm going to chime in for just a second, actually, just to explain. You know, I speak with a lot of families who are really desperate to create housing options for their kids because they see nothing on the horizon. And, you know, most families really just don't have financial resources, especially in the Bay Area, you know, to create things on their own. And so they look to public programs. But then they see that as soon as you use public money, there's no preference, right, given to, they can't give any preference to their own kids. So they lose their incentive to work on housing development, right? And again, I think this is crazy. I think we have such a profound need out there that we need to carve out exceptions so that people can access public money and serve, you know, their own kids and other kids as well. I feel like we have to do this dance, but we need to incentivize development to the maximum extent we can.
Yeah. I thought about some creative ways to, not creative, some ways to make sure that people who are involved may be able to have access to those units. And one way of doing it is that maybe you can mix market rate units with affordable housing units, and then set aside the market rate units for your child. And then hopefully eventually the child will have access to Section 8 vouchers. That could be one way of doing it, or maybe doing like a for sale affordable housing deal. So something that we can talk about later. But I do agree that there is really not much incentive for a lot of families to put their time and investment and resources into affordable housing projects because there's no guarantee. And, you know, many of the families do not have unlimited resources, and they need to set aside whatever they have to secure their child's future. So I completely understand that. That was our biggest challenge with Vida, working with families, because, and then that's a whole new conversation that we can have. So because we are in the state of California, individuals with developmental disabilities are entitled to receive regional center support. So yes, they will have access to support services and case management available to residents. So let's look at some fun examples of affordable housing model. The Village Arc of Jacksonville, Florida. I visited them last year, a few months after they opened. They tapped into the 9% low-income housing tax credit program, and Florida Grant and private capital. Some amazing family years ago donated this huge property to the state of Florida, saying that this has to benefit people with developmental disabilities. So the Arc of Jacksonville became a beneficiary of this amazing gift. So they built 95 apartments, 121 residents. 80% of them are set aside for adults with developmental disabilities. That was required by the state of Florida. One thing the CEO keeps emphasizing is that this is a mix of roommates or single units. And he said that if they had to do it all over again, they would not do roommates. And they would do all one bedroom or single studios, because the biggest challenge they have now is actually roommates not getting along. So that's one thing that I've heard from some other communities as well. But, you know, I've seen organizations that do really well with roommates. So, but this is just one thing that I want to share with everyone. So they do offer rent and on-site support living services, and also some auxiliary services, which is like social activities, recreational programs, just fun activities that people have access to. Because some of the people that live there do not receive on-site support living services. They actually have off-site service provider coming to the property. So it's a great community, and it's like a subdivision. Really, it's a really amazing town. They have access to retail stores. They can walk to places. It's like a mile and a half away from the beach. A great location. So obviously, they already have about 200 people waiting on its waiting list. And because of ARC of Jacksonville and other community effort in really carving out the low-income housing tax credits for people with developmental disabilities, there are several other light tech funded communities that opened in Florida the same year, and there are a couple of more that's going to be opening in the near future. And when I say light tech, that's actually low-income housing tax credit. Sorry. So there are privately funded housing programs. Example, using Jill's company, Clarendon Properties, who rent to individuals with developmental disabilities and accepting vouchers. Thank you, Jill, for what you do. And there are family-owned LLC like Friends of Children with Special Needs in Fremont, which many of you might be familiar with, and family-led nonprofit organizations like Casa de Amma and Sweetwater Spectrum. The rent levels can vary, but you can be very flexible because it's privately funded. The advantage is that you're able to offer guarantees or preferences in LLCs. With not-for-profits, you probably have to be very careful about that, and you will have to consult with your attorney because it's supposed to be furthering the charitable purposes of the general public, not just certain group of people. And you can have flexible tenant selection process, and as long as you're okay with, you abide by the Fair Housing Act, and you have more control over development costs and pace of the project, lower cost to build because you don't have to deal with prevailing wage, local hire requirement. So you have shorter time to build and simpler financing. So it's the disadvantages that we have is that it's hard to find or raise money for real estate. As you know, it's really hard to find money. And there's a huge investor turnover risk based on the child's situation because let's say that you get into this partnership and it doesn't work out for your child, then what happens? It's not that easy to just sell your units, in case your child doesn't work out. So it's there's some kind of liquidity risk that you have to deal with. So that's you have to kind of have that in mind. And there are partnership challenges and conflicting needs. We're all people. Not everyone's going to be able to get along, and some partners might be difficult to deal with than others. So those are some of the issues that you're going to have to deal with. And there are lack of investors willing to invest in DD housing because they would rather invest in senior or other premium market rate housing because they see that the consumers' buying power, and they value that over the mission or the needs of other people. So you're going to have to.
I'll chime in here. You just said that about as nicely as you possibly could. But yeah, that was an understatement. So when I talk about my model for providing housing in the community and standard apartments and multiplexes, I say the key to success is being a bad businessman, right? Because if you're a good business person, and you want to get that 5 or 6 or 7% return, there's no way that you're going to be investing in DD housing. But if you're a bad business person like I am, and you're saying, oh, maybe I'm willing to take a minimal, tiny return, because you have some sort of philanthropic bent that's underpinning the work you do, then you can do it. But yeah, you're right, exactly. Nobody's going to invest in DD housing when they can get better returns elsewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I've had people talking to me and say, well, why don't you work with some private equity investors that are building family units, multifamily units in LA or other places, and I would call them and they would just say, well, good luck, because we would rather work with people that can pay $8,500 a month, and that's a senior population because they do have the money. So unfortunately, we might see an amazing value in building housing for people with developmental disabilities, but that's not the same with investors, especially when they have fiduciary duty to maximize the return of their clients' investments.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So it's not because they're mean. They just have a fiduciary duty and they have a different mission set for them. So can we designate all units for people with disabilities? Yes, legally you can, because it's privately funded. You can do whatever you want with your own money. And also, people might say, well, how about fair housing? Well, we're not discriminating people with disabilities based on their disabilities. And our people are protected class, and therefore we can give them preference over other population. Can we choose our own residents? Yes, depending on families, LLCs, but non-for-profit organizations, you're going to have to work really well with your attorney to make sure that its status can be preserved and the tenant selection process can be done properly. But for family LLCs, yes, you can offer guarantees, you can choose your own residence, you can have buying option, no problem. Are support services and case management available? Yes. And again, you have to work really well with the regional center and to make sure that services are provided. So this is an example of Friends of Children with Special Needs in Fremont, California. I had a pleasure of visiting them earlier this year, and Anna graciously took me around and gave me an amazing tour of this property. This opened in 2006, driven by families of children with special needs. They acquired land, donated half of the property to Friends of Children with Special Needs for a program. And so one half of the property is for a program and one half of the property is actually for housing, and they're owned by different entities. And that works really well, and that has been working out very well. So it took them about 6 years to go through zoning, design, groundbreaking, building, program design, regional center vendorization, and moving in residents and opening the Stream Center. It's 10 four-bedroom apartments in the complex. 26 bedrooms are for adults with special needs, 14 of them for caregivers. There are 26 people in the partnership, which is pretty amazing to have that kind of partnership that's that successful. An average investment per family was $165,000. And the rent for each tenant is $600 a month, which leads to return on investment, $7,700 per unit. So it's a very cost-effective and affordable model. So here's a scenario.
Actually, that the 165,000 that would not be realistic now.
No, it's not.
Family. Yeah,
but okay. But they did tell me that Anna did say that they're working on a second model, and they're looking into $200,000 per family.
Oh,
yeah,
because Anna is amazing.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Go ahead.
Well, that's because they have volunteers.
We're talking about Anna Wang, who was the co-founder of FCSN.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also think it's because they have volunteers that are willing to do a lot of work for work pro bono, like attorneys, land use people, development of the program, and things like that. I mean, that actually costs a lot more money to hire people to do things like that than to, I mean, it just costs a lot. It adds more to the cost of the development, and I think that's how they're able to save the money. And all the families are very much involved in caring, doing the property management. So if you are going to hire out all these services, then it's definitely gonna require more than 165 or even 200,000. Probably close to 300 to 500,000 for the same kind of model. So here's a private model scenario that we can look into. So a group of families as partners come together and they want to build or buy and improve an apartment complex, decide on a geographic location. Like for example, in our Los Angeles area, many of the families that I talk to would like their child to stay in the foothill community, which is like Pasadena, La Cañada, Altadena, and Sierra Madre. So that's like a safe location, safe area where the kids grew up and they have friends and families, and it's very safe and integrated and walkable. So once they decide that they're going to work together based on similar needs and resources and same vision and willingness to work together, they form a limited liability corporation and contribute initial investment determined by the partnership agreement. For example, if you see a property that's up for sale for like $10 million and there's no need for improvement, then okay, divide up by the number of people, families that you have, and figure out how much money you need to put down and make a payment. Or if you don't need to finance anything and come up with the $10 million in cash, that's great. But reality is that a lot of people will probably need some financing. So I highly recommend reaching out to lenders and making sure that you build a good relationship with them to be able to work with you, because they might be able to come up with some creative options of financing. I got a phone call from a bank in Boston yesterday on a totally different subject, and we ended up talking about supportive housing, and then he gave me a bunch of ideas that, based on the models that he has been able to finance back in Boston. So you never know. So it's good to talk to lenders and just keep them, informed and let them know that you're looking for something like this, so that when you actually find a property, you'll be able to work with a lender right away that might be able to give you some really good options with desirable rate. And designate a managing partner who managed the partnership investment and also manage a project, doing the real estate development as well. Once you acquire property for new construction or rehab and you achieve entitlement construction, you can start building your service team or designate a service provider, but make sure that it's a legal, it's a separate entity, it's an independent entity from the family's limited partnership. So the entire process can take 3 to 6 years, depending on financing and city's planning process. So it's good to start now and it's good to start thinking about who you actually want to get involved with. Let's talk about families of donors. This is a, this is a great scenario, but and then thanks to these families, very generous families, they were able to build some amazing communities that are becoming more of a model community for many of us. Let's say there's a group of families that actually do have like family foundations that have a lot of money. They want to build or buy and improve an apartment complex. For example, Casa de Amma's founder, Leatherby family. Their son was coming out of Riverview School out of Cape Cod, Massachusetts, and they want to find something after that school program. So since they lived in Orange County all their life, they bought a parcel in San Juan Capistrano, hired the builder, architect, and built this amazing 35-unit community for adults with developmental disabilities. The family basically paid off everything, the building, everything, the loans, and they set up a non-for-profit and gave it to them debt-free. They also built a service team and built an amazing staff to provide care for these individuals. And I believe it took them about 6 years or so, but they were able to, the Leatherby family was a great business family. Russ Leatherby is a great businessman, so he was able to make things happen very quickly. So this is a picture of Casa de Amma in San Juan Capistrano. It's amazing, beautiful, well-maintained, and the program is just absolutely fantastic. And one family built and managed Casa with their own money, and most of them actually have a job, and they're really thriving. And Casa is not a regional center vendor, but many of the residents receive some regional center funding through self-vendorization. And their waiting list is very long, and they're currently divided into 2 types. Let's think
what are those types? I'm just curious. What were those types?
So the first list is where you go through the entire process, and the second process, the final process, is that you have to And things might have changed since I spoke to them a few months ago, but that was what it was. The last step of the interview process is that the applicant has to live at Casa for about a week, and in one of their vacant apartment, not a vacant apartment, it's a model apartment, visitors unit. So then they'll be able to examine and assess the person more closely, not just on the paper. So the first list of applicants can go through that process. I believe the second process is waiting list is to get onto the first waiting list.
Yeah, I'm sorry to get too direct here, but I'm just guessing. I don't, you know, I've seen videos of Casa de Amma, and I'm just so impressed with it. But I'm just guessing that you know, somebody with severe disruptive behaviors might not be compatible with their program.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that is very true. So yeah, so this is one example of how private model can work. So let's talk about the public model scenario. I mean, we did talk about the disadvantage of public model, but some families are still committed to building affordable housing. That's how Villa de Vida started, actually. We had a group of families in Pasadena and La Cuneta that wanted to build an apartment complex similar to Casa de Amma, or inspired by Casa de Amma, but we didn't have the money that the Leatherby family had. So we really leveraged the political assets and some of the resources that we had through some of our co-founders. And I was hired as executive director, and we launched capital campaign. We also partner with an affordable housing developer, secure land donation in the city of Poway, and that's how we ended up moving down to San Diego. I myself physically moved to San Diego to manage this project.
And it was the city itself that donated the land?
Yes, city of Poway in San Diego County donated the land.
Why did they donate the land? What was behind that?
Because many cities actually, when redevelopment money was available, many cities actually had used redevelopment money to buy properties or buy parcels to develop affordable housing.
Yes.
So then when the redevelopment money went away, thanks to Governor Brown, who ended the program, many of these cities had parcels, but they didn't have funds to develop.
Right. Okay.
So then the cities are more willing to work with affordable housing developers who are willing to, come up with some creative options, such as launching their own capital campaign to have like $2-3 million to fill the gap in the financing part, to be able to create how many more affordable housing units for the city. So that's why I do see a value in working with cities and building affordable housing projects because many cities do have properties. I mean, a few months ago, I took a tour with City of Riverside, and they drove me all over the city showing me the properties that I own and said, if you're motivated, we'll work with you. We just have to come up with how to finance these projects. So these cities have some really attractive properties. Unfortunately, I don't think City of Los Angeles has really good properties. I've looked at some of the properties they own, and they were not really desirable for people with developmental disabilities because we have to, it has to be safe area, integrated, and all those things that were, So you have to be very careful about city-owned properties. They're not free, even though they say they're donating, because it comes with all kinds of different, strings attached. But it's still worth looking into. But there are definitely no guarantees or preferences allowed when taking public funding. So that's a hard lesson that I had to learn. So this is the Villa de Vida development that we have so far, and it's based in Poway, San Diego County, and we raised several $1 million for the building, and separately we raised about $250,000 per year for operation. When we say we, it's really the fundraising committee that did an amazing job of raising this money. And we got it through the entitlement process. We secured project-based vouchers for all 53 units. we have to set aside 1 unit for property management. Submitted the low-income housing tax credit application end of June, but it's a very, very competitive round. So if they don't make it this round, then they're going to have to wait until March. And if they don't make it in March, they're going to have to wait in July. So there are a lot of affordable housing projects that have to go through several rounds of application process just because it's very difficult to win the allocation of credits the first time around, because it is just very, very competitive. So this community will have community room and other space for offices and management offices, and the rents will be at 30% AMI, which is area median income, which means you could only pay about $460 a month for a unit here. And all of the units are set aside for people with developmental disabilities, and that was actually required by the city of Poway. So this is the example of public funding sources. You secure, a lot of money through the tax credit equity. That's why this is very, very competitive, because everybody is looking for a big pot of money, which is right here, the tax credit program. And some organizations raise some money for capital reserve, some others may not, depending on what's really required. The land donation can be worth about $3 million or more. Cities sometimes supplement that donation with a little bit of capital in their pool of money, and some loans and developer fee and HUD programs. So as you can see, $25 million is a lot of money, and this might actually be a little bit lower if this was a privately funded housing project. It just takes a lot longer and it costs more to build. So this is the process that we went through. We interviewed a bunch of developers throughout maybe 3 to 6 months period. We finally decided that Mercy Housing was going to be our partner. And then together we pursued city donation of the land. And we went through all this approval process. We did a lot of community outreach because people just don't have an understanding of, people with disabilities or developmental disabilities, and they don't really understand that we're not the same population that they might be afraid of. So we had to really educate the community of what it means to have developmentally disabled population as their neighbors, and really how that could really benefit their lives and enrich their lives. So that was really important, but also to engage the special needs population, the community in the city was really, really powerful, because they were the ones that were really speaking for this project. Went through environmental reports, applied for a bunch of fundings. We didn't get county home, but we got project-based vouchers and we got the entitlement. So the next process is to achieve tax credit, start construction, and then you can lease out and move people in. So now that we've talked about the process and covered the basics of housing and licensed care facilities, I just want to encourage you to do something, because you are going to have to start from somewhere. You can't just rely on others to do it for you. You really have to, this might be very intimidating, it might be a little too much, but you have to just go out and do something, ask questions, ask for answers, do something. And you have to build your team and work together, because you're going to have to understand your own strengths and weaknesses and build a portfolio of political, financial, and knowledge resources, and hire or partner with experts in real estate, services, compliance. I mean, I'm always on the phone. I talk to people on Saturday evenings, Sunday nights, text with them, asking a bunch of questions, and people are always available to help you, especially for an amazing project like, building housing for people with special needs. And advocate for housing and services. You really need to speak up. I mean, the power of the special needs community in Poway was just so powerful. I mean, it was just amazing. They made my job so much easier, because they're the ones that spoke up and really told the city what they need and what they want. And you really have to look at the big picture, not just your own backyard. Some people might say, well, this is not really applicable to me, and I'm not going to want this type of model. Well, you really have to look at the big picture and really encourage one another and work with other people to build something that might not be directly the best model for your child, but somehow it works for your child. Because obviously we're not going to find a perfect model for everybody, but we're just going to have to find something that works for your child. And so you have to be very flexible and be willing to be more open-minded, because we all have, people have proved us wrong many times. And there are so many instances where I thought certain models might not work, but it's working so well for other people. So I just want you to be more open-minded and be flexible and be willing to work with other people and be willing to do something. So with that, we can take questions.
Thank you, Ashley. Appreciate the presentation. Yeah, I do want to say something about your last slide about getting involved and doing something. As somebody who is in the housing business herself and has talked to countless families about their various predicaments, I know that it is overwhelming and financially and sometimes just functionally impossible for these families to become mini housing developers, in addition to the many, many, many other awesome responsibilities that they have caring for their disabled child or children. So when people say to me, Jill, I can't do what you do, or Jill, I can't become politically involved, or Jill, I can't become a housing developer and learn all about what the heck low-income housing tax credits are and all that stuff. I mean, I completely understand, and I think they're right. I don't think families actually should have that responsibility. But the fact is that we have an incredibly broken system. We have a system that prides itself on deinstitutionalization on one hand, but on the other hand has utterly failed to come up with a really solid plan B for this burgeoning, rapidly exploding population of adults with autism and other developmental disabilities. So from my point of view, again, this is me, I always, grandstand, but whatever. From my point of view, we can't have meaningful change on the ground unless we have meaningful policy changes that really empower and enable families to create solutions. And as Ashley said, choice, the whole menu of solutions, a whole variety of solutions, not just one kind of solution, because all of our kids are so very different. So where I personally want to put my time and effort is into creating that policy change. For example, we talked early in this webinar about the fact that you can't have supported living services on your own property. Well, again, that should change. That's ridiculous. That basically means that families of lesser means cannot tap into SLS unless their kid is lucky enough to get a rare voucher. Second, we have to have these vouchers available, right? If you are an adult who has limited functional capacity, cannot care for yourself, cannot earn a living, you should go to the top of the line and the top of the list in a low-income housing program and get those before people who are simply low income without these really, really, really incapacitating mental disabilities. But that's not the law right now. And we also should be treating our income tax laws very differently. I won't get into too much detail, but one of the barriers to entry here is that you can't benefit your own child, right? When you're doing a not-for-profit corporation. Well, you can incidentally, but you can't do it purposefully. Again, I think there should be a carve-out exception for this population, because this population is so exceptionally disabled and vulnerable that we need to empower parents and families to come up with solutions. And if that's what it takes, that's what it takes. So anyway, I just want to tell people that right now the cards are, the game is rigged against you. It really is. The cards are stacked against you, and we need to change the rules on the ground so that it can be easier for families to come up with solutions. And I'm sorry to go on like that, but
right.
Okay. Anyway, so we do have a couple of questions, and I want to encourage people. Actually, we have quite a, oh my gosh, we have a gajillion billion questions. So I'm going to start now. We have half an hour. I am going to go in order. The problem, okay, this is question number one. The problem with the private model is finding a person or foundation willing to buy the land and build the building and accept a low rate of return. How do we find such entities? And again, I think we addressed this, Ashley, this is very true. There aren't a lot of people like me who are willing to be the bad business person. And so we need to find new incentives to give investors or donors, right, to do this kind of work. I'm going to go on, Ashley, she has a second question. What is the possibility of convincing cities to designate affordable or homeless housing for DD instead? Ashley? So right now, I know, for example, activism.
Yeah, activism. That's why it's so important to get your political assets lined up to reach out to your city council members, county supervisors. Very, very important. That's where they can make a phone call to the city manager. But City of Los Angeles, it's going to be very difficult because there's huge housing crisis for homeless people. But it's really all these things are driven by political activism.
Yeah, and I want to say there was also a state initiative passed a couple of years ago to provide housing specifically for the mentally ill. Mm-hmm. And that didn't really encompass the DD population. So a lot of these developments that we see going up are as a consequence of the funding from that law, and we are totally left out of that.
Yeah, so for example, there's a new initiative called No Place Like Home, and that's a $2 billion state bond initiative that was passed, and Governor Brown signed it. And that's going to be rolled out probably sometime next year, and that's for people with mental illness and chronically homeless. And while you can have developmental disabilities, and that's okay, you have to have that other conditions like mentally ill and chronically homeless. So a lot of families thought that maybe that could benefit their development, but that's not going to happen. So there has to be a special carve out for people with developmental disabilities. And I've talked to a lot of people just asking questions about what if we do this or what if we do that. But it's, I'm just going to have to be very honest. I mean, their focus is really for homeless right now. The state of California has set aside a separate, or actually designated a bunch of professionals or officials to have like a task force committee for people, for homeless projects. So the head of tax credit is there, the head of home and community development, a bunch of city officials are all part of that committee. So and many of the counties and cities are launching more initiatives to fund those projects. So unfortunately, the ones that can really speak up and make a difference are families.
Okay, let's move on. What sort of housing options exist for young adults with autism who have severe behaviors and need one-to-one supervision?
So most likely those are for the group homes that would have staffing level that adequately meets them. So unfortunately, there are not that many options available in California. I have seen some great models outside of California, like in farm communities. I feel like something to do with animals and open space and just fresh air really help these individuals to a great degree. So, and those communities were started by families that have tried community living and group homes, and it really didn't work out with their child. So they went and bought a piece of land and came together, collected money, and retired early from their day job and built this amazing community, and now their children are thriving. So unfortunately, there are not that many options in California other than ICFs and group home licensed care facilities.
Yes, I'm going to add a few notes here. So in supported living, or SLS, there are quite a few adults with autism with severe behaviors who live with one-on-one staff. I even know of some who live with two-on-one staff. I even know of one case where the condition is so severe that the client lives with 3-to-1 staff 24/7. So SLS is also an option. Again, it is dependent on you obtaining that brick and mortar piece, that real estate, before the regional center will kick in the services. And I think the regional centers are also increasingly reluctant to fund some of these because, Ashley and I were just talking before the webinar, some of these programs, these supports, they cost easily $150,000 to $300,000 a year just for the supports, not even counting the brick and mortar. But it's for a lot of these adults who are very severe, that ends up being the only option. And I want to also echo what Ashley said about some of these rural or farmstead communities. Even here in California, I've heard from families whose adults have gone, from an urban environment to a more farm-oriented environment and have really thrived in that setting. Now, there aren't a lot of that in California, but if you go to our conference in December, our conference is December 2nd at Stanford, you will hear about some of those models as well. Let's move on because we have so many questions. Mm-hmm. As hard as it is to find housing for adults, the situation seems even worse for children. Group homes are few and far between, closing, and unable to take kids like my son who would require one-to-one support. That's very true, even at level 4I. Are there efforts to create housing that can support people with disabilities and their families throughout their lives?
I mean, that's what we're all here, right? That's what we're trying to do. And I believe that more individuals that are more severely challenged, there is a funding that's set aside for regional center called Community Placement Plan. And that is for individuals coming out of the developmental centers that would be need housing placement somewhere in the community. And I believe that regional centers do look at that as a source to provide housing for individuals that might have more specific, more severe challenges. They tap into that fund and actually partner with a not-for-profit service provider to provide housing, and then they provide services. So like I said, going back to family activism, that is so much more important than a service provider like me or a professional like me that keep emphasizing we need more housing. But I go to Sacramento, I attend these meetings, and I hear people's discussion, and everyone says that there's so much need for housing, but I don't really see the pace that we need to be on to meet the demand that we have. So
yeah, I just want to also add, just to answer this question, DDS, Department of Developmental Services, is launching some pilots of what they call enhanced behavioral homes. So they are, community care facilities or group homes, whatever you want to call them, that are really directed towards adults with severe behaviors. I know that this particular person was talking about kids, but those are going, to the extent that they actually get funded and get completed, they are very, very few and far between, and at most would provide maybe a model for further state investment. So I just wanted to add that is out there. Someone asks if there's a public website to see what property a city owns and presumably, might be for sale. I don't know of.
Yeah, you can go to the city. I mean, sometimes you can just email the city's manager's office or city controller's office, and they will probably have that record. And they should be able to provide that information to you because that should be public.
City by city.
Yeah, it's a city by city.
California they have something called not excess lands, but I don't know if there's a website for it. I can look it up and put it on our notes if I find it.
Yeah, and every city has kind of like a housing element report that they have to update every few years. So if you go on to the city's website, they will have some listings of available parcels that they're thinking about developing for affordable housing. And actually, it's very interesting. I mean, I went to City of Pasadena's website, and they show how many affordable housing units they have for seniors. And they actually consider vouchers as units. So they say we have this many units for people with disabilities, and they were all vouchers. So every city is different. So you can go to your city's website, or call them and say, I want to see your housing element report. And they usually update it every 3-4 years, I think, or at least 3 to 5 years.
Okay. Someone asks, Ashley, will you share your slides? And the answer is we are recording this, and it will be uploaded today or tomorrow to our website. So, and you also everyone will get an email about that as well. Yeah. So yes, the slides will be shared.
And you can email me and I can send you a copy of the slides. So yeah, absolutely.
All right, next question. Great question. How do parents find other families with similar needs for their DD children? We should not all need to become landlords. Hallelujah, isn't that the truth? Now, how do families find other families? Well, I know that there are some efforts out there to help network people. I mean, obviously, we've done that in the past through Autism Society from time to time here in the Bay Area. I know that, for example, a nonprofit called Living Unlimited is trying to network families together who, to find where there's overlapping need for their children. So I would definitely sign up for Living Unlimited's email list. I don't have their website on me, but they are connected. If you guys have heard of Camping Unlimited, which is Camp Creme. But no, it's absolutely true that you should not all need to become landlords. Especially in the Bay Area, it's exceptionally expensive to be in this business. So we do need people to come together and find other solutions and advocate together. And I would just say stay tuned with Autism Society San Francisco Bay Area, because I think we're going to be doing more along these lines, whether through Facebook or meetings or whatever. Okay. Yeah. Someone asking, how do I get the recording of this webinar? Oh, we will email you the link when it is available, and it will be on our website. Hold on. Someone's asking a question I don't really understand, so I'm going to skip that one. Sorry. Here's another one. If my special needs trust owns a home in which my disabled daughter lives, will supported living services be available to her?
Absolutely, yes. No question. Yeah.
Yeah, so long as there's money. So long as Medicaid keeps giving us money to spend on supported living. How can parents...
Actually, because I mean, that shouldn't have anything to do with the eligibility to receive services. Supported living services through the DDS funding, which is through regional centers. So this, that your income does not, it's not based on your income.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. How can parents get together and start working together? Again, I think just stay tuned for, sign up for Autism Society's newsletters, Facebook, everything. I think we're going to be doing more and more in that area. And as I said, Living Unlimited is already starting to do that.
And if you're in Southern California, just reach out to me and I'll be happy to connect you to others that might be in your area, because I do get calls and contacted by families in different parts of Southern California as well.
Great. Somebody wants your PowerPoint, Ashley. Maybe if you can send me your file, I can just post it on our website as well, on the webinar page.
Happy to. Yes.
Okay. All right. Is it possible to get everybody's asking. Possible to get, yes, I think we just decided that I will post the PowerPoint on our webinar page at SF Autism Society.
Okay.
.org. Talk about self-determination and housing, Ashley. That's what somebody asks. Maybe you can explain a little bit about self-determination.
Yeah, so I'm not so self-determination is a program that individuals do not have to, or the families do not have to go through regional center coordinator to select services for themselves. So the coordination of services will be done on their own without having to go through regional center to purchase services on their behalf. So they receive a certain budget based on their need that's stated in their IEP, and once the budget is determined, then that's where you can tap into that pool of money to purchase services for yourself. And that's a very high level explanation. On that end, the self-determination program has been out for a long time, like the pilot program has been out for a long time, so a very few selected group of people have been benefiting from this. for quite some time. So now the state is trying to make that available for everyone in the state of California. That said, it still needs to be funded by the federal government, and CMS has not approved it yet. So I believe, if I don't, I might not understand the latest update, but I believe that we're still waiting. So once we're waiting for CMS to approve this, and we don't really know when that's going to happen. Everyone says any day now, but you don't know what's going on in DC these days. I mean, anything can change. Yeah. So, and CMS is going through a lot of changes too, because the political appointees came from the Republican Party, and they're looking at certain things, and that's why the HCBS deadline from that 2019 deadline has been extended to 2022. So they're still looking into a lot of different issues. So even if it gets approved tomorrow, there's only a selected group of people that will be able to participate, and then after a few years, then everyone will be able to participate. So right now, it's a great idea. It's a great progress, but it's not available for everyone.
Yeah. So yeah, self-determination when it comes to pass, if your dollars are flexible, I presume that you can use it for housing as well as supports, but I'm not an expert on that, and it's not happening yet anyway. Let's see. Here is somebody writing in saying the website for Living Unlimited, again, which is trying to do more to network families, is www.living-unlimited.org. Okay?
And
right.
Jill, do you want to tell them about the August 19th that you were talking about, Dave? The trip to their potential property?
Oh, I don't know very much about it, but I know, look on their website. They're actually, beyond just networking people, they're also thinking about buying a property, and they're doing a tour of a property near Santa Rosa, I believe next week, or is it this weekend? This weekend. So if anybody's interested in that, take a look at the website. Okay? Will the questions be included in the recording? Yes, the questions will be included in the recording. Okay. You said that, and this is another question, you said supported living services are not available if my child lives in my home. So what I'm asking is, if the trust owns the home, the state agrees the home is not owned by me. Yeah, good, fair question, And my understanding is, if you're not living with your parents in your parents' home and it's a special needs trust, then it is eligible. The only idea about supported living was, you had somebody, an adult with a developmental disability, living in their own home. Whether that home was titled in their name or whether that home was titled, under a trust, or even if the home is titled, I believe, under the parents' names, the issue is whether the parents actually live on that parcel.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, the rule is just so crazy. So, for example, I was talking to a regional center staff person who helped make these determinations, and I said, well, it's really a popular idea right now, right, to build like a mini home, a tiny home, or what's called an accessory dwelling unit in your backyard, right? And maybe you can have your adult child with your developmental disability, living in that accessory dwelling unit, right, in your backyard, right, giving some independence, but also some supervision at the same time. And the answer was, no, we can't provide supported living services there because it's on your parcel. So you would have to subdivide your lot and get a different address, right, in order to be eligible for SLS. Now, technically, it's exactly the same thing. Physically, you have exactly the same situation, the same layout. But, to kind of comport with their, what I think are arbitrary rules, right, you would have to, do the impossible things and create basically a mini subdivision on your lot. It was insane. But no, to answer this gentleman's question, I believe that if you are not living on that property, on that lot, and it is titled in the name of the special needs trust, the kid is eligible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, somebody wants us to know the Lanterman Housing Alliance, which is something we haven't mentioned yet and really should, is meeting in Sacramento October 12th at Alta California Regional Center on Harvard Street in Sacramento. So I want to just put in a plug for the Lanterman Housing Alliance. It is a group of advocates. Most of them are housing, nonprofit housing providers here in California. And they are attempting to put their heads together to advocate for more housing options for our community. So good for them. They're great people.
Yes.
One thing that they are doing is they received a grant from the state. I think the SCDD gave them a grant to create a kind of draft statewide DD housing plan, which is, of course, something that we desperately need and something that should have been created, 10 years ago. So these advocates have a grant to do this work, and I know, because I've talked to them, that the Lanterman Housing Alliance really wants to engage with our families and our community to learn about what we need and what we want from that plan. So again, this is a sort of stay tuned for more information about that. They haven't yet started this process. And I know that it will be among the topics that we entertain at our conference on December 2nd. And again, our conference registration is not open yet. Registration will be open probably in late September, and it will be December 2nd at Stanford, so everybody knows. Okay, the questions keep coming in, so I'm going to keep going, Ashley, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Does the same problem exist if the DD individual lives in a guest house on the property owned by a sibling? Well, isn't that a wonderful, tremendous, great question? And I don't know the answer to that.
I don't think so. If they're not a legal guardian, they shouldn't. No, it's the parents, the family member. Let me go back and look for that.
Okay, if you find out, but that would be a good thing to ask your regional center rep, your service coordinator, because it seems like a reasonable thing to want. And that actually, as parents die, that's probably going to be something that happens more and more, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And somebody is giving us the Lanterman Housing Alliance email, so if you want more information from them, please email info@lantermanhousingalliance.org. Okay? All right, I think that is it for the questions. Also got a couple of nice comments from people. Thank you for writing in. Obviously, there is a ton of work for us to do as individuals caring for our adult children and also as a community. There are no easy answers here, and we really, really appreciate the work that people like Ashley do. I mean, Ashley has no skin in the game. She doesn't have a kid with autism. I mean, she's just an MBA with a huge heart who wants to do good work for our community. And we need more Ashleys in the world. We need more people to invest in these models and also to donate to these models. And we need a whole heck of a lot of policy reform to pave the way for new options. So I really encourage people to stay in touch with us at Autism Society San Francisco Bay Area. Make sure you're on our mailing list. Make sure you like our Facebook page. That's how we share a lot of information. And also, even though this, I will say this fall, we are focusing on severe behaviors for our webinar series. We definitely want to come back in the spring with more on housing and some updates for everybody. So make sure to stay tuned for that. Ashley, do you have some closing words?
No, thank you so much for your participation and engagement and for amazing questions. And if you have any follow-up questions or comments, and if you want to talk about some great ideas on housing, feel free to email me and call me, because I always love generating new ideas with people, because I think that we can all learn from each other.
And for those who are on the phone and can't see her email address, it's akim, A-K-I-M, at elevarecommunity.org, E-L-E-V-A-R-E community.org. Okay? All right, Ashley, we will end the webinar now, and thank you everybody for coming in. We will post the slides and the recording. Okay?
Great. Thank you so much.
All right, signing off. Bye, everyone.